Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where I break down the lessons we can learn as GMs and as players from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 88, Tangled Depths. Promised this video a little while ago, took a while to get made, finally had a chance to film it. Obviously I'm in a different location than normal, kind of been setting up a second office, kind of turning the nursery into an office because I needed a place to film during the night because it is fucking hot in our area, and I can't film during the day because I need to have the air conditioning off, because we have these large machines that are air conditioning right now, because we don't have working AC in the house, so I cannot film with these running because they're very loud. So I've basically just been setting up this second space. So you'll be seeing videos still shot in this space. Hopefully in a couple of weeks it'll look a little nicer, or maybe it'll cool down enough that I can go and film in the other room again. But for right now, this is where we're going to be working for the next couple of videos. Also, I want to give a shout out to a fan. I met a fan in public, which was very cool. That was Patrick. Good to see you. And thank you so much for saying hello. That was super nice. I wish I could stay more and chat, but I was with my kid, and it was, like I said, very, very warm, and I had to get him home and into the car with air conditioning. But that was awesome. That has only happened to me once before where I've been recognized, and it was at the D&D movie. This is the second time ever. It was so cool. So hello, Patrick, and it was lovely to meet you. I think that's all the major updates. Oh, this desk is new. I have a video about that. It is either out now or it will be out soon, so keep an eye out for that. I think those are all the updates, so let's go ahead and talk about Critical Role. When we last left off, the party was with the water tribe of the Ashari, getting ready to go into the elemental plane of water to complete Keyleth's rite of passage. They're going to steal 3 lodestones from the domain of a kraken. These stones are used by the Ashari to keep their civilization afloat. They make their home close to the rift to the elemental plane because they have to defend the portal, so they can't just leave and build a new home somewhere else. And these lodestones are actually produced by the kraken, which means the party can't kill the kraken or it will effectively doom this civilization. So they have to go into the elemental plane of water and get these stones and not kill the kraken. So essentially, this is a heist. So they go to Uvenda, the leader of the Water Ashari, and they ask her all the questions they can think of in advance. And they get a lot of useful information, which I'll summarize for you. The lodestones are small, probably about the size of a mango at best. The kraken attacks with lots of tentacles. That's the main way it attacks, but it can also manipulate the flow of water, and it can use ink to obscure the area, and it can electrify the water. So because the party asks in advance, they now know about the monster's layer actions and legendary actions. Matt found a way to basically characterize it within the world, but that's what he just told them. The players also ask about other creatures that might live in the area, which is so smart. They're asking whether Matt will keep summoning new minions into battle. But Uvenda says that any flesh and blood creatures just get eaten by the kraken. But there are some, quote, half-crazed elementals that sometimes wander into that area. So that's good to know. The players even ask if any animals in particular are good at avoiding the kraken's attacks, and Matt doesn't give them any specifics because they're asking about strategy, like what's the ideal strategy, and he doesn't want to go that far and answer that question. But he just says anything that can get in and get out fast, and also search the area for lodestones. This whole interaction is fantastic. One of the issues that I think a lot of D&D players have is that they don't think to scout the area in advance or ask a lot of questions in advance. Now, Vox Machina is really good about asking lots of questions in advance, but a lot of the time Matt doesn't want to divulge too much information. He'll try to keep his answers vague because he wants these big reveals later on. We talked about this way at the beginning of this series during the Underdark arc. It happened with Kavarn. The players kept asking, what is Kavarn? And Matt was kind of waiting until the most dramatic way that he could answer that question, and they weren't finding that yet. So there was a lot of vague answers in response. However, in this case, the adventure is structured like a heist, and heists work best when the players do have lots of information. Matt is still dressing up this information with in-world language rather than game language. He's not saying layer action or legendary action. He's not using those terms. And of course, he's specifically not telling the players what animals to become because he doesn't feel that's his job. Well, Matt doesn't feel it's his job to tell his players what sort of animals they can become. We may come back to that in a little bit. But he's still giving them way more information than he usually does. Ordinarily, I don't love doing that all that much. I like the sessions, at least of Critical Role, where there's a bigger reveal, and I don't like it when an NPC can just answer all your questions. It's not very dramatic. But it does depend a lot on how you structure your adventure. This is something that I'm keeping in mind as I run my Monster of the Week campaign, where part of the challenge is whether or not the players ask the right questions in advance. Because if they don't, they may be in for a really rude surprise when it's time to fight the monster. Now, it's much easier to handle that in that game because they can say, we're doing research, and they make a roll specifically that gives them a list of questions they can ask. So they can't just spam you with an endless stream of questions like Vox Machina does in this scene, or I guess they do a lot with Matt. But in this case, I think when you're doing a heist, it's good to give the players lots of information. That's how heists work. Uvenda suggests they actually go and practice in the water first, because they've never fought underwater, and there's a lot they need to know. They go to a deep pool, they cast water breathing on themselves, and they get in and they discover that they move at half speed. All their attacks are at disadvantage, and ranged attacks cannot hit at all past their first range increment. That's a big setback. Also, to be pretty dark down there. They can't talk underwater, so they can't cast spells. Matt says they could maybe get one spell out before the air leaves their lungs, so even with water breathing cast on them, they can only cast a single spell. Guns won't work at all. Lots of their magic items won't apply, like the Boots of Feral Leaping. However, anyone with the Alter Self spell cast on them could swim at normal speed, and that'll make a big difference. And Tarion can cast Alter Self on some coins, so other party members can use those coins to cast the spell on themselves. That will deplete a lot of his magic for the fight, but it'll help everyone else out a lot. Their tentative plan is for half of them, the party members who are not going to be as good at moving or searching or fighting, those party members can become killer whales, and then everyone else rides them. Then they can drop down and search for the stones. And they can all be under the effects of the Animal Shapes spell. So even though some of them are transforming now, she can cast it, Keyleth can cast it on all of them, and she can keep changing what kind of animal they become. Vax asks, okay, so if the plan fails, what then? And they decide, well, some people act as decoys and draw the Kraken's focus, and everyone else focuses on the stones. That's kind of the best plan they land on, to be honest. They conjure a hero's feast, and then after they eat, some members of the tribe come over and give our heroes some collars with a magic stone set into the middle of each collar, which allows them to talk underwater and cast spells. And they also each get a set of goggles. Turns out, as Taliesin points out, the magical civilization that lives on the water has some solutions for these problems. But before the night is over, Keyleth takes Uvenda aside and asks a little bit more about her mother, who seems to have perished on her Aramente, probably here, at least that's how it appears. We learned that she came here only 4 or 5 years ago. Other than that, Uvenda already told Keyleth everything she knows. Vax takes Keyleth aside after that and says that he believes in her. He knows they're all always going to wrestle with self-doubt, and her especially. That's part of the job, though. And they talk a little bit about Sovereign Uriel and how he also struggled with doubt, but that's what Vax admired about him. And it made him seem like a good man and a good ruler. And he just reminds her that he believes in her. Then he busts out his wings and they do some sky fucking. In the morning, as they get ready, Percy asks for an extra set of goggles and an extra throat bead. That's the name of the collars. When asked why, he says he's just got a hunch about something. I suspect he's hoping they're going to find Keyleth's mother on the other side of the rift. I mean, how baller would it be if they got down there and they somehow found Vilya alive, and Percy was like, here, put these on, now you can cast spells with us. That does not end up happening, but like, that would have been pretty cool. Although we actually come back to the subject of parents a little bit later as Tarion hands out his enchanted coins.
All right, I guess I'll make 4 coins.
Okay.
And pass them out to Percy, little elf boy, little elf girl, and Jumbo.
All right.
Hi, my name is Vax.
Oh.
That's short for Vaxildan.
Have you heard the legend of Tarion Darrington?
From you, yes, I have.
Oh, I'm good, then.
It's a good
We're
tale.
equals.
That is my sister. Her name is Vexalia. You can call her Vex. Some people call her Vax.
It's true.
It's very confusing.
Yeah, you can call us by anything, we'll both respond.
At
It's
first,
fine.
yes. Welcome.
Okay. Okay, were your parents fond of you? Because to name them that similar would be just quite annoying growing up. You must have gotten confused constantly.
Popcorn?
I walk away.
I follow suit.
Don't worry, we'll talk some more about names in the next episode. In the meantime, as they're about to get in the water and swim down to the portal, Matt describes Dodie getting in the pool of water and just sinking. And they realize Dodie can't really swim, he can't get transformed into animals like the rest of them. He might even just straight up rust. They should probably leave him behind. Now, I don't know for sure if that's what Matt was trying to say, otherwise I don't think he would have let them retcon the situation and say, no, never mind, Dodie didn't get in, which is what they do. And I think if Matt had been trying to tell them that this is what was going to happen, he would have signaled it clearer to them. He would have said, as you see Dodie getting in the water, instead of saying Dodie gets in the water. But still, they're concerned Dodie won't be any help at all, so they leave him behind. Unfortunately, that means that Terry is about to enter this fight without his companion, which is a pretty significant loss for an artificer. But he agrees it's best to leave Dodie behind, and he asks him to just document the local wildlife, the comings and goings, just get a little bit of atmosphere for the book.
A little seagull kind of like flies overhead.
It's all for color, for the book, you know.
Another one.
Their guide, Waverander Durant, takes them through the ocean, through the reef, and down to a tower carved at the base of the ocean. It's completely open and empty inside, no floors, almost more like a very tall, very thin coliseum. There are more people down here, including some merfolk. And inside the tower, there is the crackling portal to the elemental plane of water. They also see the example lodestones, which are actually just green orbs. Keith discovers that these stones have a similar vibration to the throat bead. They seem to be made of a similar material. So she asks if it glows or vibrates any more when she gets close to the stone, and Matt says that it does not. That is a really terrific question. She basically asks if they have a little divining rod attached to each of their throats that will signal to them when they're getting close to a lodestone, and that would be extremely helpful for them. They could basically patrol the Kraken's domain and wait for one of their stones to hum, and then start looking in a more localized area. But Matt says no, and that's probably a good call. After all, the team has lots of other ways they can make sure to find these stones. They don't need lodestone detectors attached to their necks. But again, they are asking a lot of smart questions going into this challenge. Durant tells them that when they enter the Kraken's lair, they'll find lodestones scattered across the ocean floor. They're not in one particular spot. And they do tend to get covered up by ocean sand, so the players might have to dig for them. So now we're getting a sense of the shape of this upcoming challenge. However, as Percy holds the stone, the clasp on his cloak gets drawn towards it. Percy uses magnets to hold onto his cloak because he walks on walls and upside down a lot because of the spider climb boots. So Matt is telling them that it's magnetic. There is a way for them to search for these stones. Exactly how Keyleth was hoping there was. By swimming around and seeing what reaction something you have has. Terry has a compass which spins wildly but focuses on a lodestone when he gets close to one. They also learn that they can use detect magic to get a read off of the stones. They are magical, so that will help them focus on specific areas. And then Vex can also cast locate object to find lodestones, so that's another excellent way to find a more general area that you can then search with detect magic or a compass or just general digging. So this is at least a reasonable idea of what to expect. They pass through the portal and we take our break here. This is perfect timing for your break. We're about an hour and a half into the episode, and that's when I like to take a break anyway. And of course, no matter what time it is or how deep into the session you are, you're going to want to take your break now before they start sneaking around, because as a game master, you have no idea how that's going to go. It's going to depend a lot on their rolls, and that's just all out of your control. Speaking of which, they come back from their break at about 2 hours into the YouTube video version, and we have another 3.5 hours left in this episode. It's a long one. And now, as they come back from their break, they can see the environment. So here is the map of the terrain. It's mostly open sand with some scattered plant life, but there's also some walls. And later Matt will describe, as the players interact with them and ask about them, Matt will describe how there are very old ruins down here. And Matt does a good job of explaining why these are here. A bit later in the scene, as Percy examines these, Matt will have him roll an intelligence check to figure out what they were, and they'll learn that this was part of a larger building that was built down here. It wasn't a structure that sank. It was constructed in the plane of water, and it was constructed for much larger creatures, like giants or something larger than humans. It's been down here for such a long time, there's no way to gain any more information off of them. They've been heavily eroded, but Matt is hinting at some sort of ancient history here. However, that feels like just a smokescreen to me, because the reason this is here is because Matt wanted to put some cover down here, which is great. He could have put down something like a coral reef, but this is something that's much more clearly defined. They know how big a wall is. They know how to most effectively use one as cover. Matt has these pieces of terrain already, and he can sell this to his players by implying there's some grander history at play, and that's a fantastic trick. But I don't think he put some walls down here because he worked out the backstory for some ancient empire. I think he worked out the backstory for some ancient empire because he wanted to put some walls here. And 100%, I approve. This map still has a lot of open space, not a ton to interact with, and not a lot of elevation, but at the very least, there's some effort to make it a bit more complex than just an open expanse of ocean. Part of me wishes there was like a pirate ship instead, but honestly, I'm nitpicking. This is fine. Matt also describes how they see hundreds of bones across the ocean floor. Vax scans the bone for undead and doesn't find any, but hey, great call. Good thing to look for. Vex looks for elementals. Matt says that she feels dozens in the area, but no clear direction or particular location. So Matt is confirming for the players that during this fight, you probably need to worry about elementals arriving in the battle, basically spawning in like minions. Even if that's not narratively how it'll be playing out, mechanically, that's what could happen. Also, just FYI, there are no elementals in this fight. All that talk about how the elementals might show up, that never ends up happening. Now, maybe Matt did not actually plan to introduce any elementals, or maybe there's something the players could have wound up doing that triggered them, but it didn't end up happening. Or maybe Matt just forgot because the fight was too complex, or he decided not to introduce them because the fight was hard enough. We'll get to that in a minute. Terry puts a daylight gem from his helmet into the box that he and Percy made, but he keeps it shut for now. It's a searchlight if they need it, since it's so dark down there. And this gives Keyleth the idea for a potential distraction. If they need it, they can try to divert the Kraken by casting daylight on an arrow or a rock or something and sending it far away from the rest of them. They don't really know if the Kraken relies on vision or not, but, given that anglerfish exist, surely some aquatic creatures do have vision, even in the darkest depths of the sea, so it would at least be worth a shot. They pop Trinket out of the necklace so they can turn him into one of their animal mounts. He's going to be one of the killer whales.
Okay.
As soon as Trinket...
He's having a singular experience for a bear, though.
Fun, buddy. Oh god. No. I'm gonna cast Speak with Animals on him.
It's very wet.
It is.
What's going on?
We're gonna be swimming for a while. You're gonna make me cry, dear. We're gonna be swimming for a little while, alright? Just giving you a heads up. You may be turned into a whale in a little bit.
What is a whale?
However, rather than immediately casting animal shapes, Keyleth casts Pass Without a Trace, so they can sneak. And if that fails, they'll switch to animal shapes, since those are both concentration spells. And Vex casts Locate Object, also concentration, and they start searching for the lodestones. Matt switches to scary/ominous music, the kind of stuff that he uses when, the players were going to confront the Briarwoods and they'd already stolen Vax, and so they knew there was going to be, a ritual down there. That's the kind of music it is. It's sort of very intense. It's not battle music, but it's evil ritual music in my mind. It's definitely ramping up the tension for everybody. They zero in on the area where they can find a lodestone, and Terry uses Detect Magic to find it. Apparently there's an underwater mountain just off camera, and Keyleth sees a shape at the top with some long tentacles drifting in the water. She whispers into the earring for everyone to be very quiet, but Terry doesn't have an earring. So Sam is not sabotaging the party or anything. He's not deliberately causing chaos, but he just reminds all of them, at least as players, that they can't signal him that way. They find the stone, they unbury it, and they put it in the bag of holding. 1 down, 2 to go. It is on Grog's body. Well, on his person, in his possession. They follow the Locate Object spell to the next stone, and Matt describes some more bones on the ocean floor, with strips of flesh attached and dangling and flowing in the current. And Sam describes that Terry vomits, just a cloud of foulness in the water around him. Thankfully, Matt doesn't make Terry roll an extra stealth check for this. I think Matt knows that Sam would not be too upset if that happened. He loves rolling with failure. He loves the idea that Terry's inexperience as a hero could land him in hot water, but Matt does not want to punish the rest of the party for that. After all, this is literally just role-playing. But let's just say that Matt had placed another arrow in his quiver, or if you prefer the knife theory analogy, Sam had just handed him another knife. In the next area, they search for the stone, checking a few different areas, not finding it. When they roll to look for it, Laura does roll well, but Sam rolls a 1. So Matt describes Terry pulling something out of the sand, but it's not a lodestone, it's a humanoid skull with strips of flesh attached. And of course, Terry starts audibly gagging. So Matt asks for another stealth check at that point, which seems fair given Terry's reaction. And Sam rolls his second 1. So Matt says that Vex finds the stone, but before she has a chance to even pull it out of the sand, she just knows where it is, but she hasn't picked it up yet or unburied it yet. This shape disappears off the mountain. Keyleth gets on her earring and warns the others, and then tentacles begin to surround the party, and a large shape appears at the edge of the map. We've officially lost the opportunity for stealth, at least as an entire party. At this point, Keyleth is thinking quickly, and she starts calling out orders to the rest of the party. Terry, dig up the stone. Vex, we're going to do the daylight arrow to draw its focus away. And everyone else, remember, don't kill the Kraken. I don't know if the daylight arrow will do anything at this point, but she's definitely being proactive in a way that we rarely see from Keyleth. But unfortunately, it's too late. Also, at this point, Sam realizes he forgot to use luck. He has the luck feat, just like Vax, and so he could have re-rolled one or both of those natural ones. Oops. But still, it's not like the players have made any major tactical blunders. I mean, not as far as I can see, anyway. Yes, they don't have Dodie. That sucks. Yes, Percy's guns don't work underwater at all. That's a shame. Yes, Sam forgot he had a reroll. That's a bummer. Sure, maybe Marisha could have given them that order 30 seconds earlier and avoided the fact that they were snuck up on by the Kraken, I guess. But mostly, there's not a ton they could have done differently. And now they just have to figure out how they're handling this situation. And it's initiative, so here are the highlights. There they were. Did you enjoy them? No, I'm kidding. But look, this fight has a pretty rough reputation in the community. If you haven't watched it, it's just not a fun fight for the entire thing. In the immediate aftermath of this episode, Matt Colville actually made a video just called Slog. And it was about how sometimes you think a fight is going to be fun, and then it's just not. And there's nothing you can do but just try to get to the end of it and put it behind you and get to the next session. The only way out is through. And there's nobody to blame, it just happens. But I've always thought, it can't just be that simple. We have to be able to learn a lesson from this, right? I mean, we've talked about other lessons throughout this episode, but in this specific scene, there has to be more of a lesson than that. Now, this is not the worst fight in the campaign. I maintain that it's not as frustrating and boring as the fight with Riskel Daxio in the hallway in the clasp headquarters. It's closer to the Gavarn fight, but nowhere near as bad. It's similar because in both fights, the fight itself, everything that was happening, should be exciting. Dramatic things are happening. It should be fun. But the longer the fight goes on, the vibes at the table get worse. Now, with the Temple Showdown, we knew why that happened. I made a video about how people kind of forget exactly the cause for that, and it wasn't quite the same as people had been claiming. It wasn't metagaming, it was just a huge communication breakdown, and that wasn't handled well by one particular player. But at the end of the day, we know that that player was the one killing the vibe at the table in that fight. So in this case, I kind of went in like a detective. I was trying to figure out, was there someone who killed the vibes, or some specific moment that happened that killed the vibes? And after rewatching it, yeah, Matt Colville was right. The fight just, it burns them out. Nothing in particular happens. There are definitely tipping point moments, straws that break camels' backs, but the fight just goes way too long, and there's not enough for them to do. But I don't think the fight was bad design either. Let me make that case in this video, but ultimately that's going to be my takeaway. The fight starts with really solid vibes. Early in the first round, the Kraken uses a layer action, and they all get hit with a burst of electrical energy.
Use luck, Terry.
I did.
I did too.
And grateful
All
for
right,
it.
so
They all take 18 damage, save for half damage, with a DC higher than 22, so not many of them made it. The situation is tense, but, like, in a fun way.
as you hit that,
What is going on?
That's-
Watch
Waves
is telling him
going
he's working out.
you're not working out.
Wow.
This is adrenaline kicking in.
Drunk right now.
I don't know, man. Kraken just showed up. That sounds like adrenaline to me.
I know, it
Please
says
take a moment to breathe.
He'll cast Daylight on the arrow, and at first Matt says that's not how the spell works, but then he rereads it and realizes he had it wrong. Okay. We had a rules debate very early in the fight, and once again, it's between Matt and Marisha, like is often the case. Once again, Matt is mistaken, but it's resolved pretty quickly. That has happened before, we've talked about them before, but in this case, it was pretty quick, pretty inoffensive, and I don't think it harmed the vibes at the table. The arrow hits the Kraken, and it doesn't distract the beast, but it does provide more light, which is not nothing down here. They find out the hard way that it is immune to lightning damage, which means Vex's lightning arrow spell and Percy's lightning glove are literally useless. So Percy can't really do anything in this fight. I mean, he does have the sword, he uses it a little bit in the fight, but he doesn't want to get that close to the Kraken, who would. So he puts himself on lodestone duty with Terry. Great move from Taliesin, and the design of this encounter is working. Some players can focus on the Kraken, while the others focus on the task at hand, on the conditions they need to achieve before they can leave. At this point, they get the second lodestone into Terry's bag of holding, since he and Percy were together and not close to Grog. So we just need one more stone, and then we can go. We're like only one round in, we're good. But at this point, the Kraken starts grappling people. So that kind of spoils the plan. You can't just grab a stone and shove it in your bag and leave. You can't even really go hunting around for lodestones when you can't move. And they can't really do anything to the Kraken because it's Percy and Terry. Not only do they not want to hurt the Kraken too badly, but they literally can't hurt the Kraken that badly anyway, and they can't successfully break out of its tentacles. Taliesin also has some sort of phobia at play. It's either fish or being underwater or something similar, so he's just not having the best session ever since this mental image makes him anxious, and also, as a player, he can literally do nothing to solve that problem. Vax tries to free his friends, wanting to cut them out of the tentacles, but instead Matt rules that it's an athletics check to break the grapple. Vax is not very good at that, which is a shame, but we'll come back to this in a minute. Matt is going to find a better solution going forward. The Kraken can spend 2 legendary actions to blast lightning out of its mouth as well. That hits 3 targets. That's another nasty move it has. But it's, like, reasonable. Like, this is not too bad or anything like that. But then we get the nastiest trick it has up its sleeve when it eats Grog. Just swallows him whole. But again, look at Travis's face. He's delighted, because now he gets to be Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy 2. He tries to bust his way out of the monster that ate him. That's really fun. The point I'm making here is that the vibes are still really good. At this point, Vax tries to free Keyleth, and Matt seems to realize, okay, he should be allowed to try to cut the tentacles, so we'll go ahead and figure out an armor class and like an amount of hit points the tentacles have. Now, I know the idea of called shots is kind of controversial in D&D, and I completely get that. I think this party uses called shots a lot because they came from Pathfinder, and that was a mechanic in Pathfinder, and it's totally fine if you kind of want to set those aside going forward. But with this kind of monster, I do think a tentacle should have its own armor class and its own pool of hit points. I feel the same way about the heads of a Hydra, because you're kind of reinforcing the themes of the monster and like the core fantasy of it. And also, this is going to encourage the players to cut each other free, which is going to lead to the party, whether deliberately or not, recreating iconic scenes from movies where they're trying to cut each other out from these tentacles of a kraken or a sea monster or whatever. Plus, the whole premise of the fight is that the players can't kill the kraken. Keyleth keeps reminding people, don't kill the kraken every time they do any damage to it. So if you give the players a chance to focus on tentacles instead of just harming the body of the kraken, now they have the tools to avoid killing the kraken. Now, I'm not saying this fight should be easy. Avoiding killing a monster should be tough. You should have to make tough choices. But in this case, because of all the different factors going on, I think giving each tentacle its own armor class and its own hit points is just smart game design for this encounter. And again, Matt realized that pretty fast. By the second time someone tried to free somebody, he realized this is probably the best move going forward. Now, Vax still does not do enough damage to free her, so he instead is sent by Keyleth to go look for the next lodestone. She sends the twins on lodestone duty. And Liam hates leaving his friends in danger. He will always throw Vax into the fire to try to save someone else. So he doesn't want to go hunting for lodestones, but he doesn't question the order. He knows she's right. So again, another moment that could harm the vibes, but I don't think does. She also uses control water to push everyone, including the Kraken, away from the twins, so they can look for the lodestone without worrying as much about the Kraken. Great move. Keyleth absolutely has her eye on the prize. She is laser focused on the task at hand. The Kraken uses a legendary action to take 2 people who are grappled, in this case Percy and Terry, and bash them against each other. Again, this is so fun. This is not how the mechanic works in the game, but it's a homebrew rule from Matt, something that's a part of the stat block that he's designed for this Kraken. And like, Travis is cackling. This is cinematic. This is all fantastic. At this point, Vex conjures animals, and look, we've been here before. Matt asks, what are you conjuring? But the spell does not come with a list of animals. And to make matters worse, she started by reading the description of the spell, which says that you summon fey spirits to take the form of beasts. But the rest of the party misheard her, or misunderstood what she was saying, and so they're Googling lists of fey that can swim underwater because they think she can summon a fey. They think that's the spell she cast. And it takes a couple minutes for them to realize they misunderstood her. So that's some confusion early on, and a communication issue. But also, Matt just fucking hates summoning spells. So this is not fun. But again, it's over in a few minutes, and then they get back into the action. On Marisha's suggestion, Vex summons a Hunter Shark, which has advantage on attacks against something that already has taken damage. That's going to be really useful. And man, Marisha had that answer ready. Once she realized they were summoning a beast and what the challenge rating was, once they had the correct spell, she had an answer that they were very happy to take and run with. Percy cuts himself free, swims away, takes a second wind to heal 18 hit points. Then the Kraken uses a legendary action to hit him with a tentacle. He takes 26 hit points, and he's grappled again. And this is when we're starting to see what makes this fight frustrating. They just don't feel like they can make a ton of progress, because when they free themselves and try to get away, they can't get far enough away from the Kraken to avoid being grappled again, and then it's like nothing ever happened. And even the healing was undone. But these players are pros. They do what they can to keep their spirits up in a situation like this.
Sharon, you just watched Keyleth, the pinnacle of leadership, the guiding force in this whole adventure, gets swallowed by this terrible, writhing sea monster.
It must be part of the plan. You're all seasoned veterans, right? This is all part of the plan, right? Oh, I made a horrible mistake.
Max finds the last lodestone, but he can't grab it yet, and then he's grappled. Everyone is grappled besides Vex, Trinket, and the shark that she summoned. Well, then Keyleth gets swallowed, so she's in the Kraken with Grog, who fills his alchemy jug with oil, and then she casts Fireball inside the Kraken. She doesn't want to kill the creature, she just wants to have it throw them up. She makes it very clear she's not worried about getting knocked unconscious herself, she just knows that she can't kill the Kraken and doom Vestra. But she's trusting that it has enough hit points that she can do this trick. So they do it a bunch of damage through the fireball, then the oil in the jug detonates and there's another explosion for more damage, and then there's a roll to see if the jug detonates, but it does not. Great call from Matt, though. That is, I think, perfectly reasonable. If it had detonated, I think they would have accepted it, but it doesn't, so they can use it again in the future. That's neat. But then the Kraken rolls a 1 to hold down his meal, and Keyleth and Grog are free. And then they're grappled again. See what I mean? The Kraken uses an electric pulse, and then Keyleth is knocked unconscious from that blast. And Matt narrates how, since she is grappled, the Kraken is starting to draw Keyleth towards its mouth. Excellent foreshadowing from Matt. Vex puts a lodestone in her bag of colding. They have all 3 lodestones spread out among them. So now they just have to get out of here. Grog heals Keyleth, and once she's sure they all have the lodestones, she wants to turn them into electric eels. She'll use animal shapes, and she wants something small that they can use to swim away and hopefully avoid attacks from the Kraken, and the electric blasts won't hurt the eels. Matt doesn't have the stats for that animal, but he can use a water snake instead. Okay, cool. Great, we have our answer. But then they wind up debating how fast the water snake would be, how fast the eel would be, mainly because they want something faster. Mirsha wants an animal with some speed, but also doesn't want to be too big because they're worried the Kraken is going to get them. So what she really wants is something fast, but small. But there is no stat for an aquatic animal like that, so she's trying to figure out what she can use, given the fact that these kinds of animals do exist, they just don't have the stats for them. And this is the moment that kills the vibes the most. They spend almost 3 minutes on that, and that's not a lot of time, but also, yes it is. It's too long. It's too long to spend debating a spell like this. But also, at this point, everyone's just tired, and more than that, they are emotionally exhausted by this fight. They've been keeping up the energy levels as much as they can because they're in frantic danger, they're in a tense situation, like, their nerves are just fried from being in this state for multiple hours at this point. But unlike the Kevdak fight, where there were, like, highs and lows, as there were rising action and falling action throughout that fight, which is really dramatic, this has been a pretty solid state of, like, similar amount of tension, because it doesn't feel like they're making any progress. So it's just burning through their energy. It took them 4 rounds to find the last stone. That's kind of all they've done in this entire fight so far. However, they finally settle on, we're sticking with the electric eel. That's the one that she said at first, so when push comes to shove, she knuckles down, she says, okay, I'm going to stick with my first answer. And Matt does say that because they picked a small animal, they are immediately not grappled, because the tentacles were holding larger beings, and now they're so much smaller, they can just easily swim out of these tentacles' grasp. That's not only a very cool and I think very fair ruling, but it is also, incidentally, a really nice way to get the vibes back on track. Or, you know, to try. Now, the next thing that happens is the Kraken uses a layer action to hit them all with a blast of electricity, and then Matt has them all roll saves against it, and then Matt realizes they're eels.
Because you chose eels,
Winging it.
the electricity has no effect.
Matt hates everything right now.
Weirdly, this worked in your advantage for the 20 initiative count.
Okay, good stuff. And look, I know some people watched this episode and they thought, oh, Matt did that on purpose. No, he didn't. I mean, look, I don't know for sure, but like, no, he didn't. He was taking it easy on them. No, he forgot. His brain is fried. He absolutely did not do that on purpose. Do you know how I know?
It's going to go ahead and use Lightning Storm, costing 2 of its actions. It's going to focus this on Tarion, Grog, and because you were the source of its magic and it is horribly frustrated, it's Keyleth. I need the 3 of you guys. Oh, fuck, it's Lightning Storm. It's not, you're all eels. What am I doing?
Electric eels. We are an electric eels.
Matt hates us.
It's been a long week and I keep
This is the
forgetting
Winnie the
that fucking
Pooh
shit.
of Kraken.
It's okay.
It's just trying its mild calisthenics.
All right, so it creates a lightning storm that strikes you guys,
He was just being nice to us.
And it tickles.
and yeah, it tickles your fancy a moment. That's 2 of its legendary actions. All right, first.
Now here's the thing. The next time the Kraken attacks someone with a tentacle, they get dropped out of their eel form. And Marissa asks, wait, why? Because they didn't have a lot of hit points. She says, okay. But Matt reads that as a question, like he's questioning the ruling, and she says, no, I didn't know how many hit points we had. I'm not challenging you at all. They're just getting a little bit testy. And look, that's fine. It happens. People at the table get tired, get frustrated, but like, this is why I now say that the vibes are bad, because no one's doing anything wrong in this moment, but they're all just like snapping at each other a little bit more. To that point, a lot of them start getting hit with tentacles and dropping out of their form and getting grappled. They're unable to swim away. And so when they're told that, a lot of them are just sort of quiet. A lot of players are getting that bad news and saying, okay. They're frustrated because they don't feel like they're making any progress. This is the nature of this challenge. It's a heist. Go in, steal, get out. But they got caught. Now, normally in a heist, getting caught is the fail state. You've been discovered, you get captured or killed, cut to the jail or whatever. In this situation, that's not the case. There's a long, prolonged sequence of trying to get away. But now that means they're in a combat where they can't do what they normally do and chart their progress in damage dealt to the enemy. That's not the way that they can measure success anymore. Literally at this point, they have to keep cutting tentacles so they can get free. And that's kind of the only way they can measure their progress in this scene. How many tentacles does the Kraken have left? Because they can't measure it by hit points because they don't want to kill the Kraken, but they can count the number of tentacles and make sure that if they keep cutting each other free, then there's one less tentacle every time they do that, which means at a certain point, it will run out of tentacles, or at the very least, more of them will be able to get away at that point. And so Matt just tells them at this point that the tentacles have about 30 hit points. Perfect. That's really good. Now the players have a clear goal. Someone get grabbed? Okay, use a bladed weapon, cut them free, one less tentacle, everyone swim towards the door. And that's kind of the rest of the fight. It's 4 more rounds of that. 8 rounds total of all that I've just described. There are still some interesting things to talk about in this fight, so let's cover them. Keyleth gets knocked unconscious, so they lose their animal shapes. All at once, they are no longer eels. They wake her up since she became a killer whale, basically at Matt's urging, since he's basically trying to tell her that the Kraken will kill her if she doesn't get some more hit points. And she's the only healer in the party now that Scanlan's gone. He doesn't mention that, but it is worth noting. Percy does get out. He escapes through the portal, having accomplished, like, nothing in this fight. I think he maybe cut one person free. Maybe it was himself. Vax gets eaten, and then gets knocked unconscious by getting eaten out of the damage he took from the beak. On Grog's turn, Matt has him make an intelligence check, which he fails, because of course he does. So whatever hint Matt was going to try to give him, he's not able to do so. At first, Grog just wants to attack the creature. Despite the instructions of don't kill the Kraken, which she has been saying throughout the entire fight, Marisha doesn't protest. When he says, I'm going to just attack the Kraken, she just, she doesn't like that idea, but she doesn't say anything. Like, she knows this is what Grog would do. She's respecting his choice. She may not like it. It's not part of her plan, but she is trying not to tell another player how to play. But Travis is the best D&D player in the world, so he comes through in this moment. He says, okay, I would just attack one more tentacle. Even though it's not grappling anybody right now, one less tentacle to worry about is a good thing. It's an achievable goal. It's a tangible result. Let's focus on that. So he cleaves off the tentacle with a natural 20. I think he's even using the hammer at this point. So he cleaves it off with a hammer. That's awesome. And then he goes after a second tentacle.
As you finish that strike, you feel this strange sense piercing into your relatively unprotected skull. As no language peeks through, but you get this very strong, angry, hungry sense, this emotional force that says, "Oh, now you've made me angry."
Ew.
You start realizing very quickly that this creature, while it seems like a force of nature, has been just feeding, but you've got its attention now. Its instinct has turned now to its intellect to reach out to its food. You've made it angry. What are you doing with your next attack?
Fuck, we shouldn't have attacked it so much.
Apparently my hammer is talking to me. Reckless attack.
This is an interesting moment, because they really have just been treating this Kraken as like a mindless beast. But in D&D, Krakens have an intelligence of 22. They're literally super geniuses. And so I think this is a nice way of reconciling that idea with the original adventure premise. The Kraken was just acting off of instinct, just trying to eat them. Now it's going to be clever going forward. I'm also so curious what would have been revealed in that intelligence check that he failed. Would have been that the Kraken is hurt, but not that badly hurt, so they shouldn't be worried about potentially killing it? Would it be that the Kraken has been acting on instinct, but once they stop attacking to free themselves and start initiating attacks, as Grog just did, that would bring out another side of it? Would it be a particular place that you could attack the Kraken and try to free Vax, try to make it vomit? I don't know, but whatever it was, kudos to Matt for not revealing exactly what he was going to tell Travis. Travis failed the roll, so he doesn't get that piece of information. But he did do something else very interesting into this fight. A state change. Because now, we know this Kraken is going to start acting differently. We don't know what that means yet, but we know it means something. Keyleth gets knocked out of her whale form and gets knocked unconscious again. Vax takes acid damage inside the Kraken and loses the death save. The Kraken swallows Grog. Things aren't going well.
As you're pulled inside, the voice once again, and it's now emanating outward to you as well, Vex. And in the unconscious darkness of Vax and Keyleth, the voice just says,
I've been here a long time, and I'll be here long after you are dust. Feed me and give me sustenance. I'll find my way through somehow.
Grog.
Matt is telling his players that there's a bigger chance of failure here than just what might happen to the tribe. The Kraken could get free. That would actually be extraordinarily bad. In fairness, a lot would have to go wrong for that to happen, but I mean, a lot is going wrong right now. It's not like things are going all that well for them so far. They managed to get Keyleth conscious again, and Terry uses a prismatic spray on the Kraken and does some cold damage, which is great. Grog forces the Kraken to vomit him back up, freeing himself and the unconscious Vax. However, Vax lost some death saves to the stomach acid, so he fails his final death saving throw, and he dies. Keyleth swims, and she grabs the twins and casts Plane Shift and gets the twins back to Vestra. And everyone at the table is stunned. They were absolutely not expecting her to do that. But she had to start doing some triage. She had to start getting people out, and she kind of had to trust that Grog could get Terry out through the portal. I think she at some point may have wanted to use Plane Shift on everybody, but they were just all too spread out, all always grappled. The only thing she could do in that moment is just get a couple people out, people she could reach. It's a tough situation because I don't know how I would feel if that happened at the table, but I think it's a very interesting choice, especially because of what it represents for Keyleth as a leader. That she actually had to make a really hard choice and leave some friends behind, something that she is not known for doing. And I do respect that as a decision, even though if I were a player, I would have much more mixed feelings. But I'm not a player, I'm a game master, and as a game master, I really appreciate that's a moment of character growth, I think. And also, we know from behind-the-scenes conversations that Laura had very conflicted feelings about leaving the others behind as well, but I believe that those will at least be addressed in character in the next session. They are going to talk about this, I think, at least a little bit. Anyway, in the lair of the Kraken, Terry gets knocked unconscious, and on Grog's turn, Travis is trying to figure out what Grog would do in this moment. And Sam reminds Travis that Grog does not like Terry. And Travis realizes, yeah, he wouldn't stay behind for him. So he swims towards the portal.
We need the fucking lodestone.
Oh, he's got the other lodestone. He does have the third lodestone.
Did I make it to the portal?
You are just in the outskirts of it, and you see Percy yelling at you.
Lodestone!
What? Oh.
Percy, at last, has something he can do. He casts Friends on Grog and shouts, "Toss the nitwit through the door." And at first, Travis repeats, "Toss the nitwit through the door? That's what you asked me to do, right?" And he smiles that smile that every D&D player has when they think, I've been commanded to do something, but I've found a loophole where I can still do what I want instead. And Taliesin realizes that Grog is about to chuck him through the portal instead, and you know what? He's okay with that. He chose the words he chose, so he won't be mad if Grog interprets it that way. That would still be an interesting choice, and he would appreciate that move from Grog. Taliesin always loves when Travis plays to Grog's intelligence, or lack thereof, really, really well, or does something really clever, and this would be a little bit of both. And so, Taliesin would be fine with that. But then, Travis decides, no, Percy casts Friends, which means that Grog would not want to upset Percy. That's not how the spell works. He would want to make him happy, and tossing him, a supposed nitwit, he wouldn't think of him as a nitwit in this moment, and tossing him in an angry Kraken wouldn't make him happy. So, because Travis is the best D&D player of all time, he swims back to Terry. The Kraken bites Grog, but it didn't have him grappled yet, so it can't swallow him. Small miracles. Grog is able to push Terry up to the point where he is at the door, and Percy pulls him through and heals him. I'm pretty sure by now the Kraken only has one tentacle left, but Matt describes how they are starting to heal. making it very clear that Keyleth's worst fears will not come to pass. It did not take too much damage. It won't be so harmed that it won't be able to like feed itself. It's going to be fine. So in the 8th round of combat, they're going faster at this point, by the way, because there are so few people, because people have been unconscious for so long. Not every round is taking 20 minutes or whatever. But in this 8th round of combat, the Kraken slams Grog with the last tentacle, grapples him, and swallows him. In response, Grog attacks the stomach lining 3 times and manages to force another save to get thrown up, and Matt fails it again when Grog is now vomited out of the Kraken.
With the rest of my movement, can I turn around and look at him and go, yo, oh, ancient one, can you read my mind now? And I walk through the portal.
And you do as you step away through the portal. I can't believe that shit.
Double birds.
There we go. I just tweeted that final saving throw on his end. Wow.
Hand you my glasses. And fall down.
And that's where we're going to end tonight's game. Jesus Christ.
In the aftermath, as the players talk about this, we find out that Grog only had 8 hit points left. And that could have been really bad. And also, he had the last lodestone, so that also could have been bad for just the mission they were trying to accomplish. So what do we learn from all this? Well, aside from the fact that there were some great things that Matt did throughout along the way, and some great things the players did throughout, what can we learn from how this fight went wrong? Well, we know that anytime a D&D combat hits 8 rounds, people might get a little bit crabby. This session wasn't just a death spiral, where whenever someone went unconscious, it made the situation much worse for everyone. It was also an energy death spiral. There's probably a more accurate psychological term for that, but that's how I think of it. Basically, in game terms, that's kind of what was happening. But I don't think there's anyone to blame for that. Matt thought this adventure would be challenging, but still thought it would be fun, but there were maybe just a few too many variables to make the situation difficult in a fun way, and it just became difficult in a not fun way. Underwater combat is bad enough, and then factor in that you can't kill the Kraken, and you have a recipe for disaster. Except, do you? They were having fun for a while there. The lesson here can't just be don't run heists in treacherous environments, or don't use iconic monsters in their natural environment. Hell, I would even argue that a lot of the issues sprung up when the players started using summoning spells. So, do we blame Wizard of the Coast when we have a frustrating session? I mean, sometimes, yes, sometimes that is the answer. There are definitely some adventures or monsters or player features or spells that are designed in a way that I think makes a game less fun than it should be. But is that the case here? Does that take all the blame? The Kraken should be able to just grab you and swallow you, so I don't want to blame the monster design there. It's just not fun when it happens over and over. Sure, I guess so. Not being able to kill it is a challenge, but I mean, I don't know what the alternative is, really. What could they have done differently? I'm just not sure I see that answer. And while the summoning spells were frustrating, definitely, we also had other communication breakdowns, too, that were not a part of that. Marisha had a hard time tracking the battlefield and keeping track of what was going on and knowing who was grappled and who was not. And I think she was really trying to keep track of that because she wanted to get everyone out with plane shift, and she was not able to do that, and that's very frustrating, and she couldn't even keep track of who was conscious or not, and I sympathize. Actually, I have a really hard time with a lot of that stuff, too, when I'm running a campaign or I'm running a game or I'm even just a player in a game. I will sometimes say, oh, would that person do this? And people are like, no, they're unconscious. I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So I am the same way sometimes. And Matt had some brain farts too. He kept forgetting they were immune to lightning damage, and that was funny, but frustrating, obviously. And that's another part of it. People just started getting snippy with each other. If you take a drink every time someone says the word lodestone, you'd be dead by hour 4 because they keep shouting lodestone at each other. Same is true for every time Marisha says, don't kill the Kraken. And that does get annoying after a while, but I don't think that caused the frustration either. Look, I know I'm talking in circles now, but I'm trying to figure out what is the lesson that we can take away from this. But honestly, maybe this fight just dragged out too long, and you know what? That happens. It's funny, as I'm sitting here trying to figure out a lesson we can take away from this session, you know what I feel like, right?
What did we learn, Palmer?
I don't know, sir.
I don't fucking know either. I guess we learned not to do it again.
Yes, sir.
I'm fucked if I know what we did.
But honestly, maybe that's the best we're going to do today. Maybe we just be aware of the energy death spiral, the snowball effect, the emotional feedback loop, the domino effect, I don't know. Do what you can to remember that it is just a game, and at the end of the day, the session will end, and you can try again next time. Which I realize is what Matt Colville managed to say in 8 minutes, and it took me this long, but I want to try to sit down and solve this problem, figure out what went wrong. And And at the end of the day, there is nobody to blame. It was just a long, frustrating session. Maybe it was frustrating because it was long, or maybe it just felt long because it was frustrating. I don't know. I think the reason I just spent so much time trying to solve that problem is because I think the reason people come to these videos is because I really do try to make an honest attempt to try to find a useful lesson in every episode. And while there were some great examples of some great game mastering and player behavior throughout, I wanted to figure out what was wrong with this fight. What can we learn from it? And that's how I try to run this series in general. Even during the Tiberius era, I wasn't satisfied with just saying, Orion bad, even though that was an easy answer sometimes. I want to try to add something to the conversation to provide something we could actually learn from. And I've been thinking about this a lot over the past few months, ever since, this is reheating old leftovers, I know, but Duke at One Shot Questers made a video about the first episode of the Min-Maxed actual play show that was very bizarre and confrontational. There are 2 great videos about that over on Crispy's Tavern channel. Go check those out if you don't know what I'm talking about. But basically, he kind of went very hard against another creator and really tried to take them to task for something that I don't think required that level of criticism. But I remember really wanting to talk about why Duke's criticism was so flawed and why, when we do criticize actual plays, there are ways to do it well and ways to do it poorly. I even told my players I was going to make a video about that, but then I was working on it and I realized that mostly I was just using that script to do 2 things. The first was to get my own cheap shots in at Duke's video, and that ground has already been thoroughly covered. I don't need to pile on, and I certainly don't need to send anybody else to his channel to pile on. There was absolutely no need for that. Right now, the best thing for everyone is just to leave him alone and let him figure out his own stuff. But the second thing I was doing in that video was trying to explain my perspective on what I think is and is not constructive criticism of actual play shows. But the end result of that would be, whether deliberately or not, telling lots of people that the way you interact with art is wrong. Now, Duke was all but accusing the team of Min-Max of doing fraud, and his arguments were deeply flawed. So for sure, I think that's a good example of the wrong way to criticize actual play shows. I've made videos about what I felt were inappropriate responses to the cast of Critical Role and where people go too far, but likewise, I've seen some people say, well, as long as the cast is having fun, nothing else matters. And I don't think that's true either. I think you can criticize actual play shows, but I also don't want to just police how people behave. I mean, I like some people to act better, but I don't think it's, at a certain point, it's not my job to enforce that behavior. I think that's maybe the takeaway I have. But I think it's important to know what your goal is. I think that's maybe the most important thing to keep in mind when you're criticizing anything, but especially something like actual play, where so much of it just is improv. I could spend more time talking about the technical aspects of Critical Role. I have a lot of opinions about the ideal format of an actual play show and like what makes a good actual play show and what makes some shows work and others not. And maybe someday you'll get my deep dive into how Critical Role was lightning in a bottle, and most people shouldn't try to replicate that format, but to try other formats instead. But for these videos that I work on right now, I want to spend most of my time criticizing the game itself, critiquing it, and offering lessons. And my goal isn't just to say, Matt did this wrong, Travis forgot this rule, that's how the Laura spell works. Like, plenty of people do that. I don't like it when they do it. I don't think it's productive, but at a certain point, it's not worth my energy to try to stop them anymore. But instead, my goal is to try to find the lessons we can apply to our own games and keep my energy focused on that. There are some episodes I've made in the past where I've spent more time focusing on the nitpicks. They did this wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But I didn't have a lesson over it, and I regret those, because I don't think that's adding anything to the conversation. But sometimes, you have an episode like this, where something clearly went wrong, but at the end of the day, I don't see what anyone could have done all that differently, at least when it comes to anything that would be significant enough to matter, to actually change this fight. Sometimes, fights take a long time, and people run out of energy, and after that point, it just gets frustrating, and it really do be that way sometimes. However, this episode did give me ideas for a few other videos that I want to make really soon, because they're not really lessons that I would need to incorporate into this video. They're not really related to what happened in this session, because they're not really things that Matt did wrong or anything like that. But this session gave me some ideas for other things I want to talk about, and sort of piggyback off this session in terms of like some other potential lessons we could learn that are not really specific to this session, but more just general topics. So I'm going to reference this video in a few other videos coming out soon, because it's going to be fun to piggyback off this session and talk about those other topics that have been on my mind for a while, and this is a nice example of those topics in a little bit of a roundabout way. But yeah, as far as lessons from this video, I don't know if there's any more I can say at this point. However, when we do the next episode of Critical Role, episode 89, Curious Tides, I'm going to have a lot to say about that one because Matt does some really interesting things to remind the players about the main plot. I'm very excited to talk about that episode very soon. Hopefully with not as much of a gap as between this episode and the last Critical Role episode. That was a long gap. Honestly, it's been a minute since I posted any videos at all, but it's not going to be as long between this video and the next Critical Role video because I want to talk about that one really soon because I have a lot to say. Because our heroes have been kind of just dicking around and handling all this episodic content for a while now, and they have more of that going ahead of them. But that doesn't mean that there's not a main plot in play that they still need to be prepared to deal with. There is, and they haven't been thinking about it very much, but Matt is about to remind them, hey guys, there is still a main plot going on. You need to be aware of that.